Good evening, Counterculture Boys, folks. I am here today with a person I think you're going to really, really enjoy. Jim and I are very excited to interview Mr. Corey Nathan. He is the executive producer and host of the podcast Talkin Politics and Religion Without Killing Each Other.
That's great,
refreshing.
man. Which a lot of people could use some pointers on, myself included.
Yeah, exactly. He also produces the Freedom Road podcast, Village Squarecast, Trailer Geeks, and Teaser Gods, and will be launching a new show called The Voices of Business coming up here in February. So, I mean, you're kind of boring and have nothing to do, so I'm glad that you're here with us.
Thanks for having me. First of all, I'm a big fan already just by getting the talking and the killing right without the G. You know, a lot of folks just want to be all proper. We're going to be talking about serious subjects. So they say talking politics. I'm like, no. We're talking. We're just talking
here.
We're just talking. I can't tell you how many times I've had as my stepson would say, a loud discussion with somebody. And I'm trying to keep it civil, and they'll say something, and I'm just like, I have nothing. I think part of the way our politics have gone lately is people want to believe the worst in each other, and that's awful. I mean, why would you want to believe the worst in somebody? I don't get it. We always assume the most benevolent outcome. I mean, and you know, we try, but even when we completely disagree with somebody politically, there's common ground somewhere, you know, somewhere.
Right.
So, by the way, I'm not sure if you hear this, but like clockwork, my neighbor is doing loud work right now. Do you hear that?
Yeah.
I hear the leaf blower.
No worries. I already warned you about the splashy pooch, so we've closed the door. We'll see how that goes. That's okay.
I'm sorry about that. I should have remembered Saturday mornings. But
your sound is still pretty good, though. Your sound is still pretty good. All right, so let's be all official. Let's be all official before we start off, Corey. Let's save it for the show here. We definitely at the beginning and at the end want to give you a chance to let everybody out there listening where they can find you. Of course, we'll also have all of these links on our webpage, counterculturewise.com, as well as links in the description for all of the video side of these things. So, Corey, where could we find you if we wanted to find you on the interwebs?
Oh, thank you. The easiest way to find the show is just our website, politicsandreligion.us. Not .com, it's .us. Okay. So politics and religion spelled out, politicsandreligion.us. You can find me at Corey S. Nathan on all the socials. I'm not really active on Twitter anymore, but all the other ones, except for TikTok. Actually, TikTok and Twitter I'm not on, but everything else I'm on. And it's
you're on the Chinese mind war. Okay.
Right. No, I'm not on that one. In fact, I don't think our page is even up there anymore. I checked it last night because somebody said, "Hey, check out TikTok." Blah blah blah. I'm like, I haven't done that for a year. Anyway, all the other apps you can easily find me at COREY S as in Sam NATHAN at Corey S Nathan.
All right, Corey S Nathan, easy to spell, phonetic. COREY. Don't go I because that's a girl.
Or you could go like QUARR. I don't know.
There is that.
As in rock.
Yeah, rock Corey. Yeah.
Oh man, that would be such a great insult when somebody's mad at you. They just misspell your name and say that's what you've got rattling around in your head.
Yeah,
it's a rock Corey up there. Yeah. I'm thinking about those old books about how to insult somebody without them realizing you're insulting them. And some of them
it's an art form.
So creative, but so much more fun. There are times where like, you know, if you're going to insult me that way, I'm in. Let's do that.
Yeah.
It's like when you. So that kind of leads us into what exactly you do. And I guess my very first question is, how did you get involved in this? And who was your first guest when you first had this idea?
So my first guest appropriately was my dad. And a lot of the idea goes back to when I became a Christian. I grew up in a very observant Jewish family, going to an Orthodox synagogue, kept kosher, did the whole thing. And in my late 20s, I think I was 28 or 29 at the time. 29. And I became a Christian. So if you know anything about Jewish families, I had to go back. It was actually, we took a red-eye the night before Thanksgiving, and I sat out on the porch of the house where I grew up with my dad. They were still living there, and told him why I became a Christian. And that started this really long, the first 3 or 4 years was very fraught conversation about this evolution, if you will, the spiritual, theological evolution. And to my dad's credit, he realized at first he basically wanted to disown me. He won't admit to this now, but my mother told me that at the time he wanted to go through what's called sitting Shiva, which is the ritual one goes through when an immediate family member dies. So he wanted to sit Shiva for me.
This is exactly parallel to if you had come out as being gay.
No, actually, if I went home and I said I was gay, Buddhist, even like a Muslim, like a Kareem Abdul-Jabbar type Muslim, he would have been cool with that. But
really?
Yes. Christian is different.
Christian specifically. Okay. Why?
Well, because my family comes from, his part of the family comes from what's now Chernihiv, Ukraine. So Eastern Europe. It was Russian Empire at the time. There were a lot of warring factions. There was the Tsar and the Empire, his army. There was when my grandmother was there, the Bolsheviks were just forming and building momentum. There were the Cossacks that came through, and they all fought with each other. But as my grandmother used to say, the one thing they could agree on is they all hated the Jews. And the reason that there's this thing in our cultural DNA is because all the guys who came through town, whether it was the Tsar's army, the Bolsheviks, or the Cossacks, or anybody else, they were all wearing crosses on their helmets and their chests and their shields and their swords.
They were trying to Christianize you by force.
Well, either that or just completely eliminate us.
Right.
And it was
Which
always
completely defies everything our religion, is even founded on. I've never understood that disconnect.
Yeah, there's since around the time of Constantine, it's been a problem. The intertwining of Christianity and empire has been a problem, but that's a whole other podcast maybe. But that's why the Christian thing is problematic.
I see. Yeah.
All right. So you sat down and you said, Dad.
Yeah.
I'm coming out of the confessional. So what did you go denominational at all or anything? Was it a specific type of Christianity, and what lured you in?
So that's a funny thing is I was uneducated about the different denominations and how different they could be, how different your church experience could be. We ended up going to Grace Baptist. I think they're part of the Southern Baptist Convention, but it's really a John MacArthur church. Johnny Mac doesn't teach there, but it was one of the ones that he basically planted a lot of guys that go to his school, Masters University, or the pastors and the elders. So I didn't realize and that's the other part of the politics and religion thing. So I had to have these conversations with my dad about religion. I walked into a church that wasn't primarily about the theological convictions that brought me to Christianity, whether they would admit it or not. They were primarily about these social and political convictions, and they backed their theology into it. So they started with the premise, even theological stuff, they started with the premise it must be 7 literal 24-hour days, 6-something thousand years ago. And then they backed their scripture into it without reading the rest of Genesis 1 and 2 or the rest of the Bible and thinking contextually. So I realized that, guys who started out feeling a certain way about immigration, they're going to find the scripture to support the position they had already arrived at. So I was having these difficult, and that's just one example, but I was having these difficult conversations in the church about politics. I'm like, hey guys, did y'all read the rest of the chapter, let alone the rest of the book? Like, it's saying something different than what your really strong position about whatever, immigration, tax policy, guns, like, it's saying something a little bit different than I think where your position's at. Are you willing to consider that, or are you ready to sacrifice scripture, so do away with scripture if it doesn't suit your a priori positions? And I wasn't doing it well. I'm a dude from Jersey, so like I got some sharp elbows coming in right out of the gate, so I wasn't doing it well. So I figured I got to do this program in order for me to do it better. More than any particular issue, we got to figure out how to talk about the issues, because that's what we were losing. We could figure out all these different issues. We could figure out how to, but we got to figure out how to live well among our family and our neighbors and our friends and talk about this important. I refuse to give up talking about politics and religion, because that's the important stuff. I'm not going to cede ground to the extremists and the screamers who've taken over the whole space. So that's why we started doing it. And my dad was my first interview.
Interesting.
How about that?
It's funny. People that do exactly what you're saying with the Bible, they'll pick out a piece and they'll revolve or make it fit their narrative. And it's like, this is what our news organizations are doing right now. they'll pull something out that is completely out of context, and everybody will be, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, and run around panicking over something that literally didn't happen. And we can do that to anything, and it's divided us so much.
Well, I will say that in terms of the news, whether you're reading online or watching TV or, or podcasts, I think the democratization of media can be a good thing, but it can also be a really, really difficult thing, a threatening thing. So we can be discerning and find folks who are doing good, hard reporting. Like even in the, dare I say it, the Washington Post, if you've ever read Robert Costa's reporting, that dude's a good journalist.
I've read find this stuff, and he is good.
For me, it's the adjective count, and it might come because I teach English as one of the many, many subjects that I teach. But I get into an article, first paragraph, 5 adjectives. I'm like, okay, this is an opinion piece.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. That's a really good point. I didn't think of it that way. I find in my own writing that I'm looking at adjectives and adverbs, and I'm realizing, you know what? Maybe I'll take those out. Just get to the point. Everything can be made better by making it more concise,
Right.
So that's a really good point.
Yeah. All right. So your first interview was with your dad, and it sounds like you guys are still speaking, so that worked out.
Yeah.
And do you think you swayed your dad in any direction? And did he sway you in any direction? What was the outcome of that?
That's a really wise way to ask that question, because the way to, I forgot my notebook, but the way I find that first, let me back up for a second. My dad came to a really important conclusion, and that is his relationship with his son, meaning me, was more important than even that deeply rooted religious, filial, historical, political, all of those strong convictions that he had. More important than that was his relationship with me.
So
God
he kept
he kept the conversation going. The other thing that you said,
I'm verklempt. That really
that's cool.
Because I mean, with all of everything that just went down in the last few years, I literally have lost people that are very, very dear to me, and it hurts.
Yeah,
it hurts a lot, and they'll just cut you out like so much, nothing, and that people.
Yeah,
I'm not either. I'll chase people down. I will. Yeah. But when they just completely cut you out, it's and you can't even discuss. It's like I have really strong convictions, and I'm sure you and I disagree on a lot, but I have nothing so strong that I would just not see you as a person.
That's the thing. That's the thing.
Personalization,
humanity, as opposed to assigning 1 or 2 data points. I could tell you, hey, listen, I'm a big Nikki Haley fan, and that's all some of my friends need to know, and that's all that they create an entire
I've totally
narrative
written
about
you off now, right?
Yeah. So
when we were trying to find a home way back when, I had a golden retriever who was a service dog, but she wasn't registered yet, so I had to, because that's a process. Anyways, we were trying to find an apartment, and because she's considered a big dog, everybody would just freak out. It's like, she's a golden retriever, okay? Yeah. She's really well trained, off leash anywhere. So it got to the point where I was just walking into offices, and I'm like, all right, I have a gun-toting, Trump-voting, this, that, and go down the whole list, and she's a golden retriever. Are you going to accept her or not? And it just...
I will vouch. The apartment complex we eventually wound up living in,
just with
that
blink,
exit of the mouth, that was
blink.
I was like, oh boy, and
here we go.
Sure. Is your money green?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Come on
in. Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, it's like, yeah.
Yeah, and you can just go down the list, and everybody has that one little trigger thing, and all it takes is that one little trigger thing, and it's like
it's a process of dehumanization, though.
Exactly.
Some of the comments that I try not to read too many comments, especially from folks that stay anonymous and folks that I don't have relationships with. But some of the comments I end up I'll look on, and my eyes just, it's like, don't look at the car crash on the highway. I can't help looking at it.
Right.
I know.
And it's like,
it's a signal.
It's a train wreck.
This dude's from Jersey, and now he lives in California. There's no way he's a conservative. Like, what What are you talking about, dude? Like, you need to get an enema or
to
something.
A place you can't believe stuff.
To give them credit, they used 2 or 3 gigantic brushes to paint you rather than just one. I mean, you got to give them that.
I can't believe you moved to a place. How can you be the thing you are?
Yeah.
In a place.
Yeah. There's no way he's a Christian. He's from Jersey. Like, what are you talking about, dude?
I love it when people who think that they're better than you are able to judge your faith, which kind of goes against the whole faith thing.
Right. Yeah. Right. It's but that's why your question, I think, is such a wise one, is were you able to persuade, and was he able to persuade you? Thinking of it that way, the irony in a relationship, as opposed to his transaction, which is just like throwing like rhetorical versions of monkey poop at each other. Exactly. Is a relationship is not transactional. A relationship is ongoing, and you're nurturing it constantly.
Yes.
And in order to be persuasive, I have to have the disposition of being persuadable.
Exactly.
So, specifically on the question with my dad, he has a very nuanced view on who Jesus was. And it's taken us, so this is going back our conversation is over 20 years old about Jesus. So he arrived at this really nuanced position. That is, he believes that Jesus was not only a great rabbi, what we would call the tzaddik, so the great rabbi of his generation. He was also a prophet, very much in the spirit of Malachi, Isaiah, Jeremiah. And that his prophet status was stolen, not necessarily by the Jews, but because of what happened centuries later, he wasn't able to be recognized as a prophet. He also goes so far as to say he was a Messiah candidate.
What?
A Messiah candidate.
That's not how that works.
Well, it wasn't not a candidate in the way we think of as political campaigns, but he was. I was
thinking of job interview, but
yeah. But the way theologically the rabbis would look at it is this tzaddik Mashiach? Can it be that he's the Messiah? So Ronnie, my dad, thinks that he was being considered that way among a number of great rabbinic schools. The problem, though, he was a failed Messiah candidate in my dad's view. But here's the thing. This is where it gets really interesting. The failure wasn't Jesus's failure, wasn't Yeshua ben Yosef's failure. The failure was the failure of his generation, the people of Israel. Isn't that interesting?
That is fascinating. We could do a whole show just on that, because it seems to me that the failure of the Jewish people was literally part of the prophecy that made him the Messiah.
Exactly. So, like, Dad, he goes, the failure wasn't Jesus. It wasn't his fault. The fault was with the people of Israel. And I said, yes, exactly.
That's literally the point.
That's about as close as you can get without going there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Oh, I love that you impersonate your dad. That's awesome.
Props to your father, because he,
who knows?
He at least, he's.
There's time.
Yeah,
it sounds like he's
the
gears are grinding in there. That's
being, open-minded. I think that's why I think your podcast is as successful as it is because there is a certain open-mindedness you have to have. You don't want to go into the kind of interviews you do on your podcast and not have an open mind and be willing to hear the other side, because I know that with a lot of people, myself included, a lot of the time, you're not so much listening to the other person as you are formulating a reaction or response.
Yeah.
And it's very, very important to set that aside, especially with the title of your podcast. That's, with us, counterculture wise, what's that about? But with the title being Talking Religion and Politics Without,
Yeah, ours we have to explain. So it was, the title came to me 8 years ago.
Yeah.
And that it's a combination of counterculture, which is all this anger and hate and cancel and this and that, and counterclockwise, because we're kind of going against the grain. So it was a combination of the two. And our original tag was, we're on to you, or you on to yourself. And we started out with this conspiracy theorist kind of ooky guy, and we didn't even have our own podcast. And he was interesting in that he's just always angry, just always angry. And then
he works for the call center. Of course, he's always
there's
angry.
that. But
I understand that,
and I get that. He built himself a little empire and whatnot. He brought us on as co-host, and I'm not going to go too far into that, but we ended up kind of accidentally getting our own show, and then just started building our own little empire. So when things went south, we were good to go.
Which seemed inevitable. We saw it coming.
I saw it coming. But the thing with him is he is a very smart man. He's not dumb by any stretch of the imagination. Extremely opinionated, but he doesn't back it up. So he'll say all these just crazy things, and if you're just playing politics or tribe or whatever, you want to agree with it. And I see that all the time on both sides. Both sides are completely guilty of it.
Let's just say he's of the Paul McCartney's dead and Michael Obama school of thought.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's a birther. Yeah. I mean, he's out there. And so, you think, oh man, I don't like socialism. So yeah, of course Obama isn't an American blah. It's like, okay, really though? Yeah. And that's become, every time I hear any news story, I don't care if it's about Biden or Trump or whatever, it first has to pass the really. And so they'll come out and they'll say, oh, Trump called our service people morons and idiots and this, that. I'm like, really? And then you'll look into it and you're like, no, like nothing like that even happened. But the problem is the people who want it to be true. And that's what I don't understand.
Well,
I get
a lot
it.
of
You
people
can disagree or not like policies.
Right.
Yeah. But they've built this just drooling hatred, and 90% of it is over stuff that literally didn't happen.
And it's not just one side. I mean, everybody.
No, both sides.
It's the truth because you want it to be the truth, no matter how.
Because even when somebody comes out, I have
the proof instead of the facts. It gets. I mean, we're preaching to the choir, but
particular person who said that we want. What was it? What people get so involved with the truth and they want the facts when we're more interested in what's right. Like,
yeah. I remember hearing that from somebody. I can't tell you who it was.
I know it was AOC, but I can't remember the exact quote, so I don't want to misquote her. But it was in that neighborhood. Yeah. Anyways, this is going to dovetail onto my next question. So when I asked you if there's anything in particular that you'd like to discuss, you replied, and I'm just going to read this word for word because I love it so much, and it's very, very near and dear to my heart, and I'll explain why. You said the main thing I'm very passionate about is the new movement to codify a proper word for the laugh snort. It is a very polarizing issue with some extremists in the Lort camp and the other side backing snoff. Then there are those of us who are more nuanced and inclusive and want to be sure to incorporate the occasions when laughs lead to snorts, ultimately leading to flatulence, and it's tearing families apart, and it really stinks. Now, I want to tell you my background in this because, like I said, this is very near and dear to my heart.
There's a reason.
As you can see, I am not a small woman, and I never have been in my entire life, and I am a laugh snorter. If you really tickle me, there will be snorting. And my baby sister, who's 10 years younger than me, God bless her, one day we were talking about something and she got me laughing as hard as you're laughing right now. And I let out a big old snort. And my sister looks me straight in the eyes and she says, oh, sissy, snorting is not attractive on a fat girl.
So whenever
she made me laugh and snort more.
Yeah, the best way to get her to keep snorting is making a crack about her snorting, and it just rolls and rolls. Sometimes my response will be, "Oh, sissy."
Yeah, he'll just "Oh, sissy." Okay, and the thing about my sister you have to understand is she has no sense of humor. And
I wouldn't agree with that, but
she is wicked funny, and she doesn't know it. That she does this thing like the rappers do, where they'll use a word that sounds like it should be the right word.
Yeah.
So like one time she tripped and started falling down the stairs, but caught herself. And she comes down. Now, keep in mind, she's a grown woman. We're not talking like a little kid. She's like, oh my God, I just matriculated down the stairs. And you're
That's great.
That sounds like the right word. And she really hates it when things are anticlimactic.
Yeah.
Oh, well, okay. If you hate the climate, that's one thing. But So every now and then she'll just say something and you can't laugh at her because she gets upset and is like, I'm not laughing at you. Okay, I'm laughing at you. But
your sister has two very important things in common with my mother, Phyllis. First of all, Phyllis does the thing with the words, but she does it in Yiddish. So even no matter what she's saying,
how fun!
But she got to a certain age where it's almost like you get a permit, you get the Hashem permit to make up words, and it just sounds, and especially if she still has a Brooklyn accent. So if you say verstunkene, well, it must be a Yiddish word, right? And she'll just roll out with it.
That's not a word.
It's not a word. It's not, but she will swear to you, oh no, it's a word. You just don't know. You don't understand.
I know people who use that word.
It's a verstunkene. If you put a fa and a at the end, and you have a little and a sh, you can mix it up a lot of and then it's
so is fakakta a word? Is fakakta a word?
Fakakta is a word.
Yeah, fakakta is a word. Fakakta is a word.
Are we allowed to?
But the other thing she'll do is she'll be I have to be in therapy for the rest of my life, I think now, because but when I remember that she's actually funny without really trying to be funny, I'm much better health wise. My mental health is much better. So we had to stay with them not too long ago when we moved into this house about 6-7 years ago. So we had to stay with them. Our house wasn't ready. And she comes into, I was between work, I had 1 hour. I was just relaxing before I had to go to a dinner meeting. And she looks straight at me. She says, "Hey, Cora, are you in the living room or the dining room?" I'm like, "Mom, you're looking, what are we doing?" "Well, I couldn't tell because the lights are on everywhere." I'm like, you could have just rolled out with it, Mom. You could have just told me to turn off the light, Or the
okay,
boys
my sister shares that with your mom, like the Yogi Berraisms.
Yeah.
Not Yogi the Bear, but Yogi Berra, the baseball player.
Yeah, Yogi Berra, yeah.
He knows Yogi Berra.
Absolutely, yeah, I know. I keep forgetting we're all old people, so we get these. It's talking to the youngsters.
Plus, he's from the East Coast.
There's that. Yeah, that's true. That's true. I didn't make that connection either. She'll just come up with something, and you just have to sit there and hold your breath, because if you laugh, we're literally sitting in a parking lot. She's like, "Oh, I think that's who I think it is."
That's who I think it is. It's always in the last. I was looking for that, and it's always in the last place you look.
Well, yeah, because why would you keep looking?
Right. When you come to the fork in the road, take it.
Take it.
That's funny.
Okay,
yeah, I think that we could write a play about your sister and my mom. That would be a really.
When they have a great conversation, that would be hilarious. And neither one of them.
They would totally understand each other.
They would understand each other and totally not get it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so the reason.
What's your sister's name, by the way?
Felicity. It means happiness.
This is funny. Phyllis and Felicity. That's the play.
No.
It's a sitcom.
It was meant to be. It was meant to be. So I got to tell you how we got our names. My name is Melanie. I'm named after the folk singer. My sister's name Felicity, which comes out of an episode of Star Trek, Greetings and Felicitations.
Yeah.
And when I introduced my mother to my pastor, and he found out that my brother's name was Paul, he said, "Oh, the Apostle Paul." And my mom said, "Yeah, that's exactly who I named my son after." Right.
If we ever get out of
Okay, so the reason I'm telling this story, because first of all, that was hilarious. I did literally laugh, snort at that. Is because I think you are kind of making fun of the current culture. And now I'm going to ask you, I asked you who your first guest was. And I've been listening to the guests you've been having, and I'm hearing a lot of agreement. Mm-hmm. Who was your most difficult guest? Who was the one that disagreed the most, and what was the outcome of that?
And you don't have to mention their name, just the situation.
No, I'll mention his name. So
I mean, it's probably up there.
No. I have had back in the spring, I had two good buddies of mine, both of whom happen to be very supportive of Trump at this point. They're both big Second Amendment guys. But the funny thing is that when we talked for the program, we had a really good conversation in both instances. One of the fellas I had to step back from because he said something really awful post October 7th. And sometimes I just need to take a break. I don't think he even realizes how awful what he was saying was. So I just
that's a tough place to tread. It really
with
is.
Me, I got family in Israel, so
right.
It's a very sensitive issue, and I need to know that I'm going to do more harm than good if I continue engaging with him for now. right? I'll come back around to them and we'll hang out, we'll grab a beer or whatever. But the first episode that comes to mind is a guy who had been on before, and we've had many conversations. Two we recorded for the show, and his name is Pete Dominic. I don't know if you listened to that one.
No, not yet.
It was about a year ago. No, actually, it was in, I want to say, April of 2023, because it was the day that we were having our first Seder. So I still observe Passover. You know, the Seder is one of the best things. If you ever get to go to a real authentic Jewish one, it's a wonderful, especially if Phyllis is there, because then comedy is going to prevail.
My experience with Jewish food is it's all donuts. And it's like
all brown and gray and
right. And there was literally, because I'm low carb, gluten free girl, and I'm just like, okay.
So like, low carb, gluten free, and it would be kosher. Therefore, you can eat like rocks or something. I don't know.
Maybe, yeah. Or that chicken that we had at the fundraiser that basically was salty rocks.
Yeah. Anyway, so
no offense. Just it was really bad.
Pete comes on the show, and
we got a name. We got April and we got Pete. All right, so now we can find it.
So the reason I had Pete back on the show is because I posted something, and it was, I don't understand folks who can't even imagine the possibility of voting for someone with the other letter before their name. Meaning, I had a conversation with my pastor, and I said, Dave, you can't even imagine the possibility of voting for a Democrat. And that boggles my mind. So I posted about it to see if it would spark an interesting conversation. Pete came at me, but he came at me from the other side. No, now's not the time. Republicans are this and Republicans. And I'm like, Pete, I'm supporting my state, a candidate for who's running for the state legislatures, the state Senate. She's a Republican. She's fantastic. She's terrible on this and she's terrible on that. And look what, this organization said about her. Look what this political action committee said about her. And I'm like, Pete, reel it in, man. But it was going off the rails. And then his listeners were all piling up on me. So I had to know, it's what Yuval Levin calls the pass the gravy moment. I really strongly disagree with you. Now pass the gravy. You just have to know your own limits and boundaries. When I'm going to, when I'm going to lose my, like, it's not that I'm going to lose the contest. That's not important to me, but I'm going to lose my temper. I'm going to lose my patience, and I'm going to start doing something that I'm going to regret in the morning. So I had to cut the conversation off. And I invited Pete back on the show, and man, that dude did not avail himself well. It really, to this day, it still upsets me how he handled it, because by the end, he had disparaged my abilities as a businessman. He alluded to the possibility that I was mistreating our workers. He was making fun of me about the possibility of considering voting for a Republican. And it's just like, dude, like, I get it. I get that you feel really strongly in your kind of progressive aura or whatever. But like, you're not even hearing me now. Like, I didn't even felt seen or heard, and that really that really bothered me.
That would explain why you're not on Twitter, because that is like the go-to method. Is the minute we disagree on even one little nuancy thing, I'm going to insult you and your mother and your husband and the way you look and your dog. And it's like, okay, so basically what you're telling me is you don't have a position. And you can't defend it. So you're just going to go straight ad hominem and call it a day. And you think when we back off and say, okay, I can't talk to you, they think that's a win.
Yeah.
They honestly believe they've won.
It's not a win of any sort. You have just indulged yourself. If I may, use candid language, it's rhetorical masturbation is what it is.
Oh, right? No, that's beautiful. That's exactly
what it is.
Yeah.
And the only person who got satisfied out of that
was the individual who just
was the individual.
Yeah.
So that's perfect.
Yeah.
Because the audience is getting either angry or bored.
Right.
Well, the interesting thing is
disengaged.
When I hear somebody just go off and insult a person and they're not listening, or this has gotten just maddening. You'll see it doesn't matter who it is or what side it is, but when the so-called host of the show will just shout over the top of the person because they're not giving the answer that they wanted.
Right.
And you still see this a lot with Vivek. It's like he'll not get 3 words out, and they know it, or they think they know what he's going to say, and they'll just scream over the top of him, and he can't get a word in edgewise. And then they'll turn around and say, "Oh, he said this, this, and this." It's like, no,
you wouldn't let him say anything.
Shouted at him.
Yeah,
yeah,
that's what you were shouting.
The interesting thing is, after that episode, I have a lot of listeners who are left of center, and some who are actually very, very far left. And a couple of them actually reached out to me and said, "That dude is a jerk." Like, yeah, and exactly, because sometimes it's not the merits or the content of what you're trying to communicate. It's the way that you're communicating that is either persuasive or the opposite of persuasive.
Right. Mm-hmm.
You know, you create an aversion to that very point of view.
Exactly.
You know?
I have actually replied to, embrace and amplify. I've said, wow, now that you've used the F word on me and you've called me fat and idiot and moronic, I totally see your point. I'm completely changing my opinion now. And then I block them. Well, I don't really block them. I just mute them because that's more fun. I don't block anybody ever. I just mute them so they can still keep screaming at me and see what I post, but I can't see them. That's more fun. And like every 3 months or so, I'll check in, and a lot of the times they're still screaming at me.
Screaming, yeah. I have certain thresholds. What I try to do most on social media is I try to engage. First of all, if somebody's anonymous, I'm just not going to engage. I'm not going to
bother.
Sure.
Yeah.
They can't even have an avatar. It's like you can't even figure that much out. You're a bot. Come on.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and that's part of the problem. But the other thing I try to do, it's getting harder now. I mean, it's a good problem to have. Or we have a healthy, growing audience, and that's great. So some folks I don't know, but I do try to engage with folks either that I have a relationship with or who are approaching in such a way where we could have a relationship. Not that I have to be friends with everybody, but if you're not advancing in a more deep conversation that could go on for a bit, that could maybe lead to a relationship, what are we doing? Like then it is just contentious. Then it does become like a debate contest of some sort. Nobody's being persuaded.
Right.
Right.
And I miss old school debates where you'd actually come in with some facts and counter each other, and you could be proven one way or the other, or you could be more persuasive. And now it's just everybody's just. Debates have gone down the tubes. It's like all they do is yell at each other and insult each other.
And there's an audience for that kind of thing. I remember a show back in the '80s called Morton Downey Jr. Show, and the whole you remember it, and the whole idea is just he's getting ticked off, he's yelling at the guests, and they're getting ticked off. And I mean, it was all, I won't say scripted, but it was all designed to.
It was.
So
that's like Burger King, right? But if you wanted like some healthy material, then at the same time, I think Firing Line, William F. Buckley's show, was on at the same time and went into the 90s even. Those were the shows, even as a kid, those are the shows that I was drawn more to.
Right.
Or not the whole news hour on PBS, but like there's always been this segment. It used to be Gergen and Shields, David Gergen and Mark Shields, and then it was David Brooks and Mark Shields. So I've always appreciated thoughtful, well-researched, well-spoken, civil conversation among folks who have different points of view. And you look at who Buckley ended up becoming really good friends with. He ended up becoming friends with people who were so different from him politically and socially. Right. And those were
except for Gore Vidal, that set him aside. But yeah. But yeah.
I think that off screen, those guys really appreciated each other.
Yeah, no doubt.
They annoyed the crap out of each other, when the cameras are rolling. But there have been some stories that off camera they actually enjoyed each other's company.
There's a certain chemistry there that kind of belies that. So that wouldn't work if they actually really didn't. But yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
I can see that. All right, so that was your most difficult guest. Which guest? I know this is all about you. You're used to being the one interviewing.
But seriously,
you're our guest here. So
which guest surprised you the most?
Well, the first person that comes to mind is David Brooks, but for a different reason than you think. Okay. It's because he became the interviewer. There have been many pleasant surprises. Like my friendship now with Jonathan Rausch has been awesome. My friendship now with Pete Wehner, just pleasant, wonderful treasures of surprises. The reason that Brooksy comes to mind is that I was making a point of not mentioning a particular chapter in his latest book about how to be with good friends in their pain, because it was too close to home to me.
Yeah.
I don't know if you listened to that episode, but if you do, you're going to hear me cry. Like I'm full out bawling my eyes out. And what David did, I said, I just wanted to say thank you for writing that chapter. It was a very special chapter. And I had another question I was going to run into. And he goes, Corey, it looks like that really touched you. Why is that? And that's all he had to add. And I'm like,
turn
oh my
the tables. Oh.
Yeah. So being the wonderful, wise spirit, truly earnest and inquisitive dude that he is, he just sensed something, and it just opened up the floodgates. I could only share a certain part of the conversation, but he was so gracious, man. He knew something was up, and we did ultimately decide to share a part of it because I thought that was important. We were talking about difficult. I was diagnosed bipolar. And the depressive part of bipolar 2 in particular. So the depressive part of that mental state, if you will, is it's hard, man. So, and it's a hard topic, but we got to talk about it. We got to talk about it.
Yeah, I heard you talking about that on one of your episodes. You just kind of briefly touched on it, but I felt an instant connection because not my unfunny sister, but my other sister that I found later in life, she is bipolar, and you see. She lives far away, but you can always tell where she is and whether she's on or off meds or what she's up to. And, you just have to stand back and love her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so the answer to your question was, just love her, just be with her. Like on that conversation, we talked about the ministry of that sucks. Sometimes you got to sit with somebody and be like,
Jim, you've been looking for a name for our ministry. There you go. The ministry of that sucks.
Just be with somebody, hang out with them, just be there.
Yeah.
Even if you're just watching a ball game next to, now I'm going to get upset talking about it. But when I was going through this latest season, my brother, we don't really talk about it, but my brother knew I needed to be with somebody. So he'd invite me over and watch a hockey game.
That's awesome.
And just watch a hockey game. And if it comes up, man, you can't solve it. You didn't cause it. You can't cure it, so just sit with me and say, man, that sucks. I'm sorry, man.
Yeah.
So the ministry of that sucks.
No, I don't think people realize how important that is. And to not, without even getting political, to not put yourself in there because it's not about you. You may have faced something worse. It's not a contest. You may be facing something similar, but that doesn't help them. What they need in that moment is just to be with another human being that, I think that's the difference between compassion and pity.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it gets into this one-upsmanship. And I'll be honest, I find myself in that all the time.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just have to, there's been times where I've just walked up to somebody that sometimes I even barely know, and I'll just sit next to them and put my hand on their shoulder, and oh my goodness. Just, and that's all they need. That's all they need. I love the hockey game thing though, because there's so much emotion in hockey. I've only seen one hockey game in my whole life, and Jim's still laughing about it.
Well, it's like, I'll just tell you,
I'm a very proper sports watcher. I like, baseball. We cheer for both teams.
Yeah. Well, anyway, we go to this hockey game. It's the Seattle Thunderbirds. I don't remember what team they were playing, but Melanie initially was taken aback by the audience yelling obscenities at the other team and doing the other team. We don't do that. And then like within 30 minutes, she's like, yell those blankety.
I can totally see that.
On the ice.
Well, welcome to hockey, Melanie.
Come on, ref. Finish your hit.
Seen more of them. We're like within walking distance of the place.
Yeah, we lived in Las Vegas for 9 years, and you could reach out and touch the Tropicana, God rest its soul, from where we were, and never went to a hockey game, not once. And we had one of the best teams in the league.
Yeah, but they priced us out of it. The tickets, though.
Yeah.
The reason that our friends, I won't mention their names, but they know people. They're able to get discounts or free tickets or whatever, and
every now
or they're well off and they can afford tickets. But that's
even
that's
the
fine.
parking is it used to be that locals parked free, and Yeah,
I mean, technically we could have walked there. It wasn't that far away, but
I'm sure they would have charged us for our shoes or something, but
probably they'll tax your fee.
It's got really expensive really fast.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Well, somebody has to fund all those ball fields.
Overcompensated though, because we lived practically on the Vegas Strip, and now we live where you can't get internet or phone service or garbage, or we're just way out here.
It's beautiful though. I mean, if we stay here, I'm planning to use it as the launch pad for a ministry, because you have this forest.
Gee, that sucks ministries. I think he gave us our name. Can we have that?
We'll give you credit for it.
Yeah, it's yours.
Ministry of
He snorted.
I snorted.
Hey, and we come full circle.
Yay!
I have the word for it, and this might have been in a Kevin James movie. Now that I think about it, but the word snarf came to mind.
Snarf. That makes me think of Pinky and the Brain. Snarf.
And
full circle.
Once again, Kevin James, full circle.
Kevin James, that is funny because we were both in Mall Cop 2.
Were you really?
Yeah, we were extras in Mall Cop 2.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's great.
I was up very briefly see my backside, and I don't know. Did you make the cut?
Yeah, I made the cut.
You did. Okay, we played Find the Monas because he's the real actor. I hated every second of it.
I loved it. You could put me on a movie set. I wouldn't have to sleep or eat or do anything.
I hated it.
So
it was awful.
That's just me.
Every scene I was in, they cut. So we had to watch Mini Kiss, like they're midgets that are little people. Whatever. I don't know what they're calling themselves this week. The guy I talked to called himself a midget.
Okay.
He called himself that.
All right, fair enough. Let's not beat it to death.
But they do the full Kiss regalia. But the thing is, the guys actually are musicians. They actually do play the music. But apparently, they couldn't get the rights for them to do their own music, so they just had to play the canned version. And so we had to listen to Rock City.
I wasn't in that scene.
Okay. So we're supposed to be at this pool party with Mini Kiss, and this is going to sound awful, and I'm not trying to diss anybody. A certain Mr. James couldn't get his lines right, so we were there for 8 hours.
Oh wow!
That's strange. Didn't he write the script?
Do a 10-minute scene, so we had to hear Rock City over and over and over, and then they cut the scene.
Oh, that's awesome.
The only thing you see is him getting on an elevator with Mini Kiss in the final cut.
But I got to be, you can only see my backside, but I got to be in the scene where they're trying things out at the convention and things are exploding all around them and stuff.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think that day we were there for 14 hours and they didn't feed us.
Oh, really?
And it got so bad. Now, I will say this about Mr. James. It got so bad the way they were treating us that he actually stopped them and stood up and said, look, you start treating these people better or I'm walking.
Well, it's just because, Corey, there's one production company in Las Vegas that handles, the casting and the local casting and all that.
And they
because I was in several movies and it's the same bunch of people and they treat you like cattle.
Well, he could be in one of the Bourne movies.
Yeah, I was in a Jason Bourne movie.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
But once again, I'm one of the people running around screaming and flailing my arms, which is something I'm very good at.
Yeah, that's just a typecasting on his part.
I do Kermit arms really well.
Yeah.
So
Kermit arms. That's awesome.
I actually got him a Kermit the Frog thing that he has sitting because he starts getting upset and he literally starts flailing his arms. It's hilarious. And he's very much like women in that you can't just look him in the eyes and say calm down because then it's on.
Don't tell me to calm down.
Okay, one last question. Now you've been very gracious with your time. Seriously, we could have like a 4-hour interview. I could just give you the whole show because oh my gosh, the stories you could tell. How long have you been doing your podcast?
We started in October of 2020, so over 3 years.
Over 3 years.
And you've expanded. You have several other shows.
Yeah. Well, we were doing the Trailer Show, the Trailer Geeks show first. We started that one in, technically we started in 2018.
Okay,
but we started
what is a Trailer Geek?
Trailer Geeks and Teaser Gods is about the entertainment advertising industry. So all of the coming attractions and the movie posters and the
in a world.
In a world, yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. So that's one of the reasons we started the show is because a lot of times we saw the New York Times or some magazine do a write-up on the trailer industry, and we're like, that's not the trailer industry. There's like a whole industry of people who are brilliant and creative and hardworking. editors, producers, writers, designers, that are really working their butts off to make these brilliant pieces of art, these 2.5 minute or 30-second or posters that people really love. And every time we would get a write-up, it would be, I forgot his name off the top of my head. I actually met him a couple times. It would be the VO dude. He passed away a number of years ago, but it would be the inner world, that I'm like, no. We don't even do that anymore for trailers. So
it's either that guy or
that was actually trademarked. So when he left the
yeah. For real?
Inner World was trademarked, yeah.
Jim knows the weirdest things.
Yeah. It was trademarked to him personally. So when he left,
that makes sense.
With him. Yeah.
So that it's a story about the history of the modern trailer industry. So going back to really the 60s, originally the National Screen Service did all of the trailers and they would put them at the end of movies that people go see. But then in the 60s, a couple of filmmakers, Hitchcock in particular, said, this is not good. This is not advertising my movie well. So he started making his own coming attractions for his own movies. And then in the late 60s into the 70s is really when the modern trailer industry exploded. So guys like Tony Seiniger, Steve Panama, they were making trailers and posters for movies like Jaws and Star Wars. And then
those are iconic.
Yeah, they're iconic. And it became a whole industry. So now I've had guys on and women who make some of your favorite posters and movie trailers of all time. And now I just interviewed yesterday a dude who started the first really big established digital department within a marketing department. His name is Dwight Caines at Sony. So some of these digital activations that you're seeing is really kind of forward thinking, but that's I love it. I love talking to these people. It's very, very niche, but we're getting people from all over the world that are listening to it. They see a trailer that they like. The one that we released earlier this week was the guy who, I don't know if you'd remember, it was one of my favorite trailers of the last 10 years, the one for Logan, where they played just throughout the whole piece that Johnny Cash tune, Hurt. And
God, that's a good song. Oh, he owned that song.
And it's a great trailer. It's a great trailer the way he used it. Because they totally gave you an introduction to the tone of the movie.
Exactly. It made you want to see the movie. And that's my biggest complaint right now with modern trailers is it used to be you get a little snippet, you get what's going to happen? And I want to see it. And now some of the trailers.
Or might have footage that isn't in the movie because it's specifically for
the
advertising the movie.
The trailer.
Yeah.
And now some of the trailers, it's like, I don't need to see the movie now. You've told me the entire plot, how it ends, where it's going, what the conflict is. You showed me the best special effects, so I don't need to watch the movie now. I mean, I'm not even interested.
Yeah. Well, a lot of the job of the marketers, sometimes they call it lipstick on a pig because the movie is just really garbage. It's the problem with Shaggy Dog 3. It's just such a garbage movie.
Right.
So they have to create jokes that aren't even there,
Yeah.
It's interesting people.
I didn't realize there was an entire industry in there. I just figured that the studio itself put those things together. So this is something that you're involved in?
Yeah. One of my
cool.
businesses, I'm like a headhunter, basically. I became, I was producing film and theater, and one of my jobs on producing teams that I was on was putting teams together. Finding people. I didn't go to film school, so like one of my first films, hey man, I guess we need a gaffer. I'm like, great, I'll find a gaffer. What the hell's a gaffer?
What's a gaffer?
Yeah. So I became that guy.
Right.
And it kind of evolved for one reason or another into this part of the industry, the creative advertising part of the entertainment industry. So I've been doing that, and I've built some companies. I don't want to say built, but like I put the original partners together and then help them person by person build out their company, one person or one department at a time. So it was a natural fit for me to produce as my first podcast. Because I knew the industry so well. I knew the people, I knew the stories, and nobody else did because they're all busy making trailers or posters or whatever. I'm meeting new people for lunch or dinner or whatever every day. So I knew those stories and I wanted to share it, and everybody else did too.
You're a good storyteller. You're a good storyteller, which not everybody in that industry could. I mean, they have to be, but in bite-sized portions. So to expand on that, yeah.
Well, the funny thing is, I don't have to be a good storyteller. If I just ask the right question, I'll let the guy go. like
exactly.
One of the longest, real quick. Well, actually, I'll tell a quick story. So one of the first guys I had on
we
there.
got lots of time. It's our podcast. We can do what we want.
We have had interviews that went so well. We just kept going and then just split it into two and played part one and part two. So I mean, if that's where this goes, that's totally cool.
All right.
Well,
we haven't even talked politics yet, so we might have to go a little bit, but
that's fine. Yeah.
But I had this dude named Ron Moeller. He was one of the two co-founders of one of the longest existing trailer companies. They started their company in 1978, him and Bob Israel. And I was just asking Ron how they started the company. And Ron he said, well, it costs a lot of money to get a old flatbed, an editing machine and a room and a lot of money. So I borrowed $10,000 from my Coke dealer and we rent. I'm like, whoa. I'm like, Ron, we're recording this, right? He's like, oh, that's okay. He's dead now. So he knows. So
snort. There we go.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So that was, I haven't quite gotten into, there's a lot of stories just like that and even worse. But I was just saying that because I don't have to tell the stories. I just ask a question and off to the races they go.
They go, yeah, because they're storytellers too. They have to be.
Yeah, they have.
Okay, so I want to go into just a little tidbit of information that not everybody might know about you. And I always ask this question. We have what we call our intake form, and I ask for your title, and I tell people if you don't give me a specific title, I'll come up with something. I've used alligator wrestling. Badass Ballerina was our very first interview, and Jim, I'll let you tell him why we call her the Badass Ballerina, because you and she have something in common.
Well, she teaches ballet. She herself is a ballerina.
Juilliard trained.
Juilliard
in
trained.
Both opera and ballet.
Yeah.
Like
wow.
Way up there. Came to find out early on in our friendship that she was a former member of the IDF.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So she's as badass as a ballerina.
So yeah. So imagine,
So you're no ballerina.
A 2 and an AR. So yeah, there you go.
Exactly. You're no ballerina, but you're badass.
So yeah, it was. So yeah, that's where the Badass Ballerina.
Exactly. So I just she still lets us. We've had her on the show several times, and we disagree politically and whatnot. But she is one of the most amazing human beings I've ever had the pleasure to be friends with.
If you're listening,
we love you,
Mary.
Also gorgeous. It's totally how beautiful she is.
Makes Melanie jealous. Good looking. Yeah.
Jealous.
So that's why you thought of me, because she's gorgeous, and you thought of me, and
that's exactly and
not bad looking actually.
You're no ballerina, but you are badass because you have won MMA tournaments, which means you can quite literally kick some booty. So tell me a little bit about that.
So was that my first or my second midlife crisis? I can't remember now. No. We were doing some martial arts just to stay in shape, and I was a wrestler as a teenager, and so I already had.
Are we talking the on the floor half Nelson wrestler or the chair over the head?
Collegiate style, yeah, collegiate style.
Okay.
Yeah. So I already had a lot of grappling experience, but I had and then. Let's see, in my early 30s, I learned Taekwondo, which is a lot of lower body striking, which kind of, I'm a shorter than average guy. So
my stepdad is a black belt registered in Korea.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So, I mean, it's if you learn TKD from a good teacher, you're learning a lot of lower body striking, which I need. I'm usually in fights with guys that are taller than me. Unless I get inside. So anyway, I was just learning some art forms, and then we're about a year or two into it, and our teacher just had some tournaments that he was going to. I'm like, it sounds, I know how to grapple, I know how to fight, and I know how to, spar and stuff. Let me see how I'm doing out in the real world. So I went. I got my butt kicked. I was
gonna say. So you insulted some guy in a parking lot, and.
Well, no, the funny thing is, so I used to get into like the equivalent of bar fights, being on the shorter side of medium. I have this, like, especially as a young man, I had this like Napoleon complex. I had to prove myself. So I was getting in scraps. The funny thing is, once I started really fighting, not professionally, but it was like a amateur ranks. But once I really started fighting, for some reason, I did not find myself in those situations. And it's not like I would seek them out, but suddenly when there must be something about one's disposition when I know that, like,
it's confidence. It's confidence. Yeah.
It's not even a confidence. It's just like, oh, this dude wants to like get into it with me, and like, oh man, that's cute. I would injure you. Like I don't have to say it, but there's something in my brain.
No.
Maybe there's something that I'm emanating that I'm like looking at. I'm like, oh, that poor dude. Like he doesn't know.
That's what martial arts is supposed to do for you, though. It's supposed to give you that confidence that you don't have to respond.
That's the thing. That's the real art.
You just kind of radiate it. It's not something you after a while. It's not something you even consciously do. It's
right.
You're aware of what your capabilities are, and sometimes. And I talk like I'm speaking from personal experience. My cat could kill me.
Yeah, he's chasing after me because I'm one of those people. If I see something going on, I'm like, "I'll save you, citizen." He's like, "Stop!"
And actually, it turns into a Carol Burnett moment where I'm just grabbing her legs, pleading with her not to. She's dragging me along, pleading her not to do it, and it's like.
So here's another ironic thing: is I trained. So I got my ass kicked. The first 3 fights I got in, but every time you lose, you're like, oh, okay, I did that, and that, and then you start working on some forms, some techniques, and you improve your game. And what made me a really good fighter, because I won a few tournaments. I've never talked about this. It's so funny.
Really?
I went
exclusive on here, ladies and gentlemen, exclusive.
I went on to win a few tournaments, and during that period, I was training with. So I was already in my 30s. I was training with this 18. She was about to turn 19. The 6'2" woman, young woman who was training for the Olympics. So she kicked my ass every single day. But getting your butt kicked means that when you get into a fight with, like, in your weight class with somebody in your age range, like that you're matched up with, you're like, oh, this is okay. We're good. We're gonna have some fun now.
Right.
It adds to your arsenal.
Yeah, and then the other thing that made me a lot better is getting kicked in the head. Like once you get kicked in the head, no. When you get kicked in the head, you're either you never do it again, or you get kicked in your head, and you're like, oh, okay, all right. So that's what that is. All right, I can get kicked in the head.
I've been kicked by a horse.
That's hard.
I can
depending on where it is.
I can still hear the ringing.
Yeah. That's because you don't see it coming a lot of times, and then a lot of times they find your ribs, right?
Oh yeah, she knocked me across and she was being gentle. I know she was being gentle with me because she did that thing where she turns around and snickers at you.
Yeah. So no,
they call it horsepower for a reason, lady.
Yeah.
Kicked in the head. It was now, you're wearing padding, right? I mean, they're not literally just.
Oh yeah, in the amateur ranks, you do have headgear, and you have you have like stuff guarding your shins and stuff like that.
Yeah, so you could get TBI from. I mean, my lord, that could really mess you up.
Yeah, you get to a certain age where there's a few things I don't want to subject myself to.
Right.
So after a while, it was like, okay, we did that, but I did enjoy being in good shape. It was a fun way to stay in good shape.
I love how it's all past tense now. I was in shape. There was a time.
And I was literally, I weighed in almost 55 pounds lighter. That my weight class was 147. So I was,
you are little and scrappy. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I had to cut weight for fights, but at that time I was walking around about 155, 160. So it wasn't a ton of weight, but I've gained, I hit, like, I don't know, when I turned 50, all of a sudden it's like,
yeah.
like, when
you're a woman and you hit 50, it just goes boom, boom. The weight goes up, but everything else shifts down.
Exactly. Gravity always wins. That gravity's the undefeated.
Yeah, I should have just spent a lot of my days on standing on my head. I probably wouldn't need plastic surgery. Yeah.
So that's interesting. You did find something that not a lot of folks know about me. So
you put it down, and I thought, wow, that's really fascinating and completely out of. I mean, you would think that since you're going to get into mental sparring, it makes sense to have the body in tune. So you probably learned getting into martial arts a lot about how to conduct yourself when you're in a situation. And that's something I actually wanted to ask you. I once found myself in a situation where I met a podcaster in Vegas, and we were going to swap. And so he was going to have me on his for, an interview, and his was a live video, and we're going to have
Is
him
this
on
what I
ours.
think it is?
Yeah, and it turned out that it was literally a hit piece.
No.
And he brought me in, and he said, well, when you and I talked on the phone, you said X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, no, not only did I not say that, but it's not even something I would say.
Right.
Well, you said this, and that's totally not true. I'm like, well, yeah, here it is. Here's the article that proves it. And oh, you said this, this, and this. Well, then what he did is we were literally live fact checking him. Jim had his laptop, and I didn't record the call, unfortunately, because I had no idea. He was all friendly like and everything.
No, in the moments leading up, I thought, hey, he's a nice guy. He's a veteran.
He's
Totally
he's so friendly and everything. He said he was a veteran. Now I'm wondering. And what he did is he took that and chopped it up and turned it literally into a hit piece, and literally made me say things that I did not say because he edited it. So I had actually downloaded the entire episode right after it went live. So I had the original. And if we had been bigger, I could have shared that, but we weren't really that big, and he disappeared.
Yeah,
because I think he did that one too many times.
I think somebody we don't it's not a good idea to do that, but it's really not a good idea to do that in Las Vegas.
Yeah, and chop it up the way he did. And
I can't find him on anywhere.
No, you can't even find his name anymore.
I can't find his name.
And I'll be honest, I don't even remember his name.
Just got erased close.
That was my first experience with being ambushed.
And that's
we will never, ever, ever do that. And he didn't come on our
and
podcast.
you're the anti-Mario.
Mario. Oh my gosh, you remember his name. I didn't even remember his name.
So yeah.
Has that ever happened to you where either you've been on a show or you've brought somebody on a show and you felt ambushed? And do you think, part B, do you think that your experience both in your professional business where you've had to learn the storytelling ability and put things together, and martial arts, which gives you that calm confidence, do you think that helped you in that situation?
Yes, I do. So let me get to the first part of the conversation, the question first. So the closest I came to being ambushed, it was my fault, frankly, because I always try to prepare properly for a conversation, whether it's an interview that I'm conducting or if I'm going on someone else's program. So literally about a week and a half ago, I was someone had submitted to have me come on their show. Oh, great! It's always a thrill.
Yeah.
It's always an honor if somebody thinks of me. Yeah, seriously, like. So it really is. I am not over that. Like, it's the fact that you guys are having. It's a real honor that you would give me your platform that you've built up and put so much time and care and work into. Somebody reached out. And, oh, this is great. Had that first feeling. I started listening to his program, and the dude's a Holocaust denier.
Ew.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
So that it was the one time where so far that I've had to say, I don't think I'm a good fit for you. Because I didn't want to set myself up to be the punching bag, basically.
Right.
But there was one time when I went on a program that promotes itself as a libertarian leaning program. And I consider myself libertarian, but in the Fabreau Emerson model of libertarianism. Not in the, does Ben Shapiro consider himself a libertarian? But not in the, not in the combative, atheistic kind of version of it. So I said some things, for example, I ended up getting the vaccine, and we talked about that on the show, and he wanted to talk about that. So it was the host was we had a healthy conversation, but it was one of those shows where you see the comments going, and man, I was it was beyond just being disparaged or criticized for the decision that I personally it was my decision. I looked into it. I thought about it. I talked to, scientists who develop vaccines, came to my own independent conclusions and decided I'm going to get the vaccine. That's my choice.
Respectful. I respect that. Absolutely.
these folks just wouldn't have it. It was if you're that version of libertarian, you have to it's not like a live and let live. The way I think of libertarian, it's like there should be a leaf party, as in leave me alone.
Right, exactly. No, I think, and that's the confusion is you get labeled as an anti-vaxxer if you say the government should not mandate my health choices.
Right.
I shouldn't be at risk of losing my job over getting a shot that hasn't been tested. That's ridiculous. But if I want to do the research and make a decision that is best for me, that should be up to me.
Which is what I did. When I did not get vaccinated, but I had to consider my health, my age,
and the fact that we already had it and had natural immunity, which we weren't allowed to talk about if you even mentioned those words. Between 2020 and 2022, you would be completely.
But it's like I didn't blindly follow one. This wasn't ideologically motivated. It's health,
and we don't
look
at other people and say, how dare you and what's wrong with you, this and that, because they made a different decision. We make our decisions for different reasons. And and what I love, my favorite is, they find out that I literally teach biology and chemistry and math all the way up to calculus. I'm not a dumb woman. Okay. When I'm reading, not just the statistics, because what they say, there's statistics and then there's, damn lies. But when I'm reading, these really technical terms and what it means and what it goes and this, that, and the other, I understand that because I teach it. My favorite is when they say, well, you're an idiot, YOUR.
Huh.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
I'm sorry. I'm going to have to ask you to respect my pronouns.
So we didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So
okay.
you were faced with these just awful people that are judging you in the chat, which is hard because you're watching it go by, and it's hard not to internalize it when it's coming at you that fast.
Especially when you're trying to concentrate on the interview itself.
Exactly.
And then
right. So that was the closest I came to being set up for to be a punching bag of sorts. But I do try to.
He specifically wanted to talk about that, knowing
I'm
that
not sure.
his audience.
I'm looking back and I'm thinking that he probably thought that I was leaning more in his direction and that I'd be able to come on like all the rest of his guests, and basically be a cheerleader, not really be a guest and interlocutor, but be more of a cheerleader for his thing. A version of like an extension of himself in a way. But I came on and I was like, no, man, I happen to get the vaccine. Well, I talked about an interaction, a failure on my part, an interaction with one of my kids. So the older of the two, we have 3 kids. The older of the 2 boys is a middle child. And he was about to turn 18 when it was announced that the vaccines were being developed. And at first he was vaccine skeptical. But even saying, to your point, Melanie, he was vaccine, but even saying skeptical, I want to make my own decision. He was getting beat up rhetorically, like emotionally, mentally by people in our family, including me. Like, how can you do that? How can you think that? That's terrible. You want to kill grandma. You
want to kill grandma. Yeah.
Yeah. So by me doing that and me participating in that and him having a dog pile on the rabbit and everybody beating him up that way, he dug his heels in. He's like, well, to hell with all you guys. Now I'm definitely not getting the damn vaccine.
Yeah.
I circled back around.
I think there's a lot of people like that still.
I circled back around with him months later because I realized I was culpable in that the way that we approached him. Not that, like, listen, I came to my own conclusion. So for my kid, I'd love for him. I came to it because I believed that it was the right thing for our health. But, I've evolved to thinking that folks can come to their own conclusions, to your point, about their own decisions for their own health, right? But at that time, all I wanted to do is I wanted to continue the conversation with him, right? And he didn't want to have the conversation, and I understood why. I lost the privilege of being in conversation with him. So I approached it completely differently, and I was starting to learn how to do this better. And part of that is just go with a radical sense of curiosity. Like, dude, I want to understand you better. Like, I want to understand why you came to that conclusion. And that's when he told me, like, listen, I really was just skeptical. I didn't want to be an experiment for the FDA.
Right.
At that point. But when you guys were mean to me, you convinced me exactly of the opposite of what you wanted to convince me of. I'm like, oh, that makes sense. I didn't think of it that way.
Right. And I think, you said you wanted to talk a little bit about politics. I think that's why the current administration is failing in their message so much, because when you call half the nation terrorists, and you literally tell us, if we don't agree with everything you do and say, that we need to be hunted and sought out and brought down, do you really think that's going to change us to believe in what you're saying? Do you really think that's going to unite us, or are we going to dig in our heels?
And I think a lot of the so-called mainstream media is fanning the flames of this as well. It's not just
well, the story, there is something to that. There is something to that, Jim, where there's a recipe that a lot of folks who are producing media understand, that if they stoke anger and fear, they elicit the same response that people get when they do a hit of crack cocaine. It's literally chemically the same
fear
thing.
Porn. Yeah.
So, you know, I could address what you just said, Melanie, but I think that. Do you want to talk about this?
You said you wanted to talk politics.
You won't go there?
I mean, it's entirely up to you.
Let me back up for a second. I have a theory about why Nikki Haley is not going to win the Republican nomination. I still think that there's like the equivalent of hitting an inside straights chance that she'll ultimately be the nominee, but she's not going to win it through the primary process.
Right.
But the reason that she's not going to win it through the primary process, there's a lot of reasons for it. Part of it is because Iowa, for example, only 8% of registered Republicans came out and voted in that, in that process. So it's a very small percentage of a party that's participating in the primaries in the first place.
Yeah,
that's part of it. The other part of it, though, and this is the meat of it. Nikki Haley is not popular enough with today's Republican Party, today's Republican voters, because she does not sufficiently hate the left. That's my working theory. You have to, in order to, what's going to win within today's Republican Party is a sufficient level of true hatred for the left. And I believe that hating the left is neither a governing philosophy nor a winning strategy. And frankly, I don't think it's conservative. So I'm kind of addressing what you're talking about. So what I see, I'm maybe more, I don't know what the right word is for it, but I'm more open to what's happening in the Biden administration. And some of the things that I've appreciated about what's happened in the Biden administration, and can appreciate what's happening in the economy, for example, is that huge pieces of legislation passed. Why? Because Biden was able to mitigate the excesses of the far left of his caucus in order to work with Republicans. So like the first piece of gun legislation that's passed in over 2 decades, right? But who was leading negotiations on that? A conservative senator from Texas, John Cornyn. If you look at all the major pieces of legislation, bipartisan infrastructure, CHIPS, it was Republicans typically that were leading negotiations that Biden ultimately got his caucus around and signed the the legislation into law. So if you look at a lot of things that ultimately helped the economy in terms of jobs, in terms of reining in inflation, it was Republicans that were leading that. Now you couldn't take, if you're looking at Republicans as the enemy, that never happens. Even last spring, when they the last time they were facing the fiscal cliff, who ultimately got in the room with Biden? It wasn't Hakeem Jeffries. It wasn't Chuck Schumer. It was Kevin McCarthy, the leader of the Republican part of the House at that time, before he got the boot. So it was Republicans. But if you're the kind of politician that Trump was, you're the enemy. You're no. So you have to. There's a level of requirement to see anybody with a D before their name as the enemy, and I see that in my church too. But Biden is able to say to his own caucus, it requires somebody in that caucus to say to the extremes, like what's happened since October 7th, with people who are essentially pro-Hamas in the Democratic Party or to the far left, for Biden to say, no, this is not who we are. This is not who we are. This is not who we should be as a country. This is not how we conduct ourselves in a working democratic republic. So I think it takes a leader.
I think one of the problems that a lot of us are having is we consider ourselves classical liberals, or at least that's kind of where we were. But and we're still exactly where we were. And the left has moved so far away from that now we're considered far right tinfoil hat wearing, extremists. It's like we haven't moved.
Right.
We still believe in freedom of speech, and we still believe in the Constitution, and we still believe in live and let live, and we still believe in let adults make their own decisions and leave kids the hell alone. We still believe in really easy fundamental things. We still believe in working together.
And and I don't usually say this, but we could be mistaken. I mean, what is your take on that?
So I think that there are extremists that would identify as left or liberal or progressive. It doesn't define the party. So if you look, for example, at the last DNC, the last Democratic National Convention, how much time did AOC get? She got all of about 30 seconds or less, right? How much time did 4, 5, 6 different Republicans get? They got main stage prime time for 20 minutes a pop.
But do people see that? I mean, all you
see
is AOC on her Instagram, and all you see, Taylor Swift's going to swing the party, and all you see is all this stuff that
anybody can have an Instagram.
I mean, us old geezers are paying attention, but we're going to be outvoted by a population who can be swayed by TikTok.
Yeah. But you're not going to be outvoted. That's why that's one of the reasons I'm doing the program that I am, is because I refuse to cede ground to the 6 or 7% on the left or the 7 or 8% on the right that are the extremists, that are the screamers, that are taking up all the oxygen out of the room. I want to take our village square back. I want to take our public square back, because 85% of us are the exhausted majority, the vast majority, right?
Yeah, because I've been saying for years, because I'm not registered any party. I honest to God, I feel politically homeless. There's nobody that speaks for me. We're not represented. Yeah. We're not represented, and nobody speaks for me. And it doesn't matter whether it's left or right. Whoever gets in there doesn't do anything that helps me. I mean, I'll be honest. You and I are going to disagree on this. When you're going to say economy is doing great, and my wages have gone down, and everything I pay for has gone up, we're suffering.
Yeah.
And for them to get up there and say, oh, the economy is great, what's wrong with you, is insulting and cruel, because we are suffering and everybody we know is suffering. People are not seeing this amazing economy that these elites keep blowing down our face. And it's very separatist.
Yeah.
So
because what we're getting.
Let me just address that. So first of all, I cannot deny your experience. I was having this conversation with a buddy. I snarkily posted a thing about I forget it was. Oh no, it was when the S&P hit a new record high. I said, it's a shame about the economy, huh? And my buddy reached out to me. He's like, dude, I can't take my family of 4 out to even a meal from at McDonald's.
McDonald's is beyond our pay grade.
So there's a reality to that even somebody like me, that I pay attention to the rate of inflation. I pay attention to unemployment. I pay attention to the markets. I pay attention to the relation of wages and inflation. Like I pay attention to it on a deeper level, but big macro numbers, right? Big macro, at least domestic numbers. But at the end of the day, if like my son, the same son who chose not to get a vaccine, he's like, Dad, I can't fill up my tank for less than $100. That's a real lived experience. And at the end of the day, if he's associating that with Biden's policies, I mean, I could talk to him all day long about the fact that there's a record amount of oil production, literally in the history of the world of any country. Doesn't matter. At the end of the day, he can't afford to fill up his tank. So that's a real lived experience. And I think it's destructive and counterproductive, to say the least, for me to deny you of that experience. No, you're wrong. Like the episode that it was respectfully, you're wrong about the economy. So I'm being
that was the first one we actually listened to, because it was intriguing, and you came up with some irrefutable points.
99% of it. I mean, okay, so here's the thing: is a lot of it all comes from the S&P, this and that, and blah blah blah. Okay, well, you're looking at someone. I've spent my entire life in poverty. The only stock I've invested in is chicken feet, so I can boil it myself and put it in the freezer and hope that I have enough food next month when I can't afford to buy any food at all. Yeah. So.
Yeah,
it's not speaking to us.
A rich dude's so I was raised on a teacher's salary, so I'm not coming at it thinking that everybody's, and it's a fair point. That's the same dude who this guy named Austin that I grew up with. He's like, S&P, I can't even afford McDonald's, let alone a 401k.
Right.
So it makes sense.
S&P, I can't afford Mickey D. What are you talking about?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, you gotta talk to people where they're at, as opposed to impose a reality you think they should accept. Like, nah, it just doesn't work that way.
That also ties in with our faith, though. I mean, that was the thing about Jesus. I mean, he got criticized a lot for hanging out with prostitutes and tax people,
If you also
meet people where they are, it's.
If you look at
they're not interested in that.
Right.
You gotta meet people. That's the impression they give us.
Yeah. Well, I'm interested because Jesus was interested, and if you look at his first, his disciples, there's an interesting section when the disciples are being introduced. It's this guy who is a brother of that guy, this guy who is the son of that guy, and then there's two of the disciples, Matthew the tax collector and Judas the zealot, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those guys were identified by what we would think of as their political parties, their political affiliations,
right?
And they couldn't have been more at odds. It's like, you think Democrats and Republicans are at each other's throats? The zealots came to formed and gained ground and evolved, and the fire was lit underneath them, specifically because other Israelites, other people in that part of the world, and their people in that nation, if you will, were working for the Roman occupiers in order to collect their taxes. So Jesus made a point of putting these polar opposites that are at each other's throats, but he wanted them to be among each other and figure it out. You can still be the tax collector, you could still be the zealot, but there's something that's more important than that. There's something that's transcendent over and above whatever whatever bumper sticker you got on your car.
Right, exactly. Exactly.
Not that they were driving cars that had bumper stickers.
That is an excellent point, and I may actually borrow that for a future talk.
Yeah,
on one of my podcasts, because that is an outstanding point.
There's a great organization with some materials for churches that's coming out called the After Party. David French, Curtis Chang, and Dr. Russell Moore, the editor in chief at Christianity Today. They've been identifying, because they've been ostracized. The truth is, I don't know if you know those guys or what you think of them, but they're, Curtis, I wouldn't say is conservative politically, but David and Dr. Moore are as conservative as they come in their politics and in their theology. And yet, because Dr. Moore was early to the party in being skeptical about whether evangelicals should embrace, or he was part of the Southern Baptist Convention at the time, should embrace Trump as a political leader. He was ostracized and ultimately forced out of the SBC. David French, same thing. In his writing, the guy, one of the dudes who's most responsible for the biggest free speech, free association, freedom of religion cases at the Supreme Court over the last 25 years. This is David French, right? And yet, because he's also I don't even know if he called himself a never Trumper, but because he's skeptical of embracing Trump, he's been ostracized. His family's been, to this day, facing death threats. So I don't know what you think of those guys, but they're identifying it as a problem within the church, and pastors don't know what to do. So the after party is about figuring out how to redispose ourselves of the right disposition, of the right disposition, but a better disposition.
Well, a transcendent one.
Yeah, that we keep our eyes fixed on Jesus and not on Trump.
Exactly.
Right, exactly.
That is something I really don't appreciate is, I'm supposed to make these moral equivalents with Trump, and then you're offering me up something that's even worse. As far as, I don't want to go too far down it, but it's like, he did this and he did that and he did this 30 years ago. And apparently Christians are no longer supposed to believe in redemption or forgiveness. We're just supposed to just not believe that anymore. And if we do, then we're not Christian. At least that's what I'm being.
To put it more fairly, if you want to put it that way, just you're dispensing of your faith for a higher god of politics.
So I'm not supposed to forgive the sins of the past at all, but I'm supposed to just completely overlook the sins of the present. That's what's confusing me.
Because it needs to be applied across the board.
Well, he said he might do this, or, we think he did that, whether he did or not, or he did this and that, which he may have done. But you need to be behind this dude because he's doing all those things now. I'm like, okay, you've really lost me.
What I would say is that when I criticize Trump, I'm criticizing Trump, not you. So a lot of folks,
people can't make that discernment.
It's hard. It's hard.
Yeah.
Because listen, I don't identify as a liberal or a progressive, but I have a lot of family and friends who are. So when I tune into Hannity or Ben Shapiro, I try to listen. Even what's his name, Dan Bongino. Like I try to listen to shows.
I love Bongino.
Yeah, I mean he's a Staten Island boy. Like he's not. That's where I was born. I was born in
Joey
New
Bag
York.
of Donuts.
Tough guy. You don't mess with him. Yeah.
But so I'll listen to that. So or Mark Levin, and a lot of the conversation, especially their opening monologues, is about the left. We're going to tell you all about, and it's they're picking up on this space that Rush really created. The left is trying to do this. The left wants to do that. The left is coming after your babies and wants to eat them and make soup out of them.
Yeah, but they do kind of tell you they want to do that, though.
But here's the thing. The mistake that we're making is the left is not a homogenous group. The left is broadly defined as anybody who doesn't assign or align with a particular set of views. So Pete Wehner, for example, David French, I've already mentioned a few of them. These guys are as conservative politically as they come, or as you would say, classical liberal as they come, theologically conservative. Even a couple of young Earth creation conservatives in that crowd, but yet Trump skeptics are essentially lumped in with AOC just by virtue of not being an orthodox with a Bongino or Levin particular set of political views. They're lumped in, so it's not a homogenous group. And
they do the same the other way, though. If you say, hey, I really like this policy, or, I think he's the better option because of X, Y, Z. Oh, you're just a Trump tard and this, that, and the other. It's like, no, Trump is not my choice, but he's better than,
what. So
I
guess what I would exhort, what I would encourage is like, take it on an individual basis. The tendency, what we've been trained up in, since the time of, because I was listening to Rush, maybe not the late 80s, but certainly by the early 90s. But I would always pick up on the overgeneralizing, mischaracterizing, and vilifying of broadly the left. And what we have to allow for is what we were talking about at the very beginning, the humanizing of individuals on an individual basis.
Exactly, which is why we're not on Twitter, because yikes.
Well, I mean, I'm gonna confess something about. I'm not going to say it's about Melanie, but it's about myself. We can talk in broad generalities about certain things or certain, like, I'll just use illegal immigration as an example. Okay, that it's wrong and all that. But we know people who have emigrated, undocumented friends, if you want, whatever, if you want, and we're friends with them. Well, it's just, but what I'm saying is, it's one thing to talk about it when you're living among people and you interact with them personally. A lot of that just seems, for me anyway, to just go away. It doesn't matter as much.
Because you humanize them.
Because I've humanized them, because they're human and they're standing in front of me. That's one of those dichotomies.
Between people who've been here a while, made a life for themselves, are trying to go through the proper, and the guys that beat the crap out of a New York cop and then flip them off on the way out, because they face no consequences. And this is something that this administration has built, is people who are coming here to take advantage of us and don't care about this country. And I don't even want to get into the abortion debate, but it's like there's no nuance anymore. It's either you're a baby murderer or you want to make moms die who, it's like there's it's gotten to the point where it's comical. Like, we can't even talk about it anymore.
Well, it's like we spoke about earlier. It sells more insurance policies and cars for people to come on TV, and especially medications to help you deal with all the stuff that's screaming about
always
on the news.
Yeah.
So it's like,
are you suffering depression after watching the news?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, so you've got it sounds cynical, but follow the money.
In a way,
they're weaponizing it, but yeah, in a way.
So but that's incumbent on us. That's incumbent on us. Like if I am, I was going to be an asshole and say like that sounds like a you problem. No, but that's not what I'm saying. What I am saying
said that. So.
So what I would say is that it's incumbent upon us to be discerning in terms of what news we're curating our own feed in a way.
Right.
So exactly. I can go on and find somebody that I disagree with and listen to them just enough to develop some rhetorical talking points that I can throw as grenades at somebody who doesn't agree with me on a particular issue. Right. But that's completely that. Then I really will go crazy. I'm already on the edge. I already have a disposition that's on the edge as it is. So it's my responsibility to seek out thoughtful writers. It was a lot easier as recently as 10 years ago, when we had prominent writers like Charles Krauthammer, for example. Certain voices would show up. So I'll go to New York Times, I'll go to Washington Post, but the people I read in Washington Post are the conservatives, the George Wills in the Washington Post, dudes that can hold their own. Ross Douthat, or David Brooks and David French in New York Times, conservatives that can hang around folks that are probably like a lot of a lot of liberal leaning or progressive leaning. They can hang in that environment.
Well, I think that's a very, very important point that you just made. They can hold their own. And this is something I've talked a lot about, even within the realm of religion. If your belief system is so fickle that you can't even be around people who question it, and maybe that is a you problem.
Yeah.
If you can't hold your own and you can't be courageous enough in your own faith, and I'm talking, and politics has really become a religion in a lot of ways.
It has.
Then maybe you need to look at that, because if you get violent and upset and you shut down when somebody even asks a question, and it might even be a genuine question, because this has happened to me, that means that you don't really believe in what you say you believe.
Well,
our Bible tells us to question. Jesus told us to question.
The Bereans.
Thomas was beloved because he doubted. And that we are invited to do that. And other religions, and I am lumping in politics, other religions that discourage that, well, that gets more into the cult realm, where if you ask questions, there's something wrong with you, or you need to be excommunicated. And I would rather be around people who disagree with me, but are able to hold their own, are able to say, well, this is why I believe what I believe.
Well, it can be a real challenge. And oftentimes I see two different solutions. The first one is to close the mouth, open the ears, and listen to what they have to say, because it might sway you another way. I've been swayed another way. You've been as well. The other way is to bolster your position by actually doing some research and some hard thinking and prayer or whatever, just to get deeper into your point of view, to see if, to test it, if you will.
Well, and even
when, as God said in the Bible, put me to the test.
Exactly. And even when
it's not something that
by someone who has an articulate, intelligent, well-researched opinion. And that's something that conservatives tend to appreciate. We don't get as much into the change of mind because I'm emotional. I'll still go in and I'm like, okay, well, that's completely different than what I thought, but I'm still going to go in and I'm going to read about it. I'm going to find writers, like you said. I love it that whenever they lump me in with whatever, because I disagree with whatever it is they're saying, and it could be any minute point.
I'm just going to put two words together that somebody.
No, I got to tell them the story.
I'll let you tell it, because
I want a plaque.
And then
I think
then we're actually hitting 2 hours of conversation.
I'm actually really proud of this one. Now, I have been called a lot of names. Okay, I've been mooed at, I've been oinked at, I've been called I've been called both a libtard and a Trump-tard, sometimes by the same person, sometimes within the same tweet. I've been called a moron. I love it when they say, "Why, you are an idiot." I've been called, and once they find out that I actually do, teach higher math and science, and they say, "Well, you must be really bad at what you do." It's like, yeah, because I totally don't make a living, fixing what teachers don't teach, because I actually tutor. And I've been called every name in the book, but the one thing that I got called, and I swear I'm not making this up, and I'm proud of this, I want a plaque for this. I am a Zionist Nazi.
Oh, how does that work?
Exactly.
I actually thanked this person so profusely that they blocked me. I was like, wow. I'm not even sure how to take that, but there's a little part of me that's kind of proud that they got so frustrated and so tangled up in their rhetoric that they could put those two things together and think that made sense.
Right.
Which means she doesn't exist because she just negated herself.
It's like, yeah, you're right. That is exactly what I am. I'm a Zionist.
That's a level of ignorance that's so creatively stupid that I have to give it high marks just for its creative, ignorant, just so there is a lot of that, but fortunately I'm also in conversation with a dear friend of mine who is more sympathetic to Palestinian citizens. And she knew that I was in a state of mourning for many weeks because I have cousins there. And in fact, my contemporaries, their kids are all active in the IDF right now. So she saw that I was hurting. She saw that I was kind of in a state of mourning, and she took the time to say, "How you doing? How you doing, friend? How you doing, brother?" Even though she definitely sympathizes a lot more with the plight of Palestinians. She's my friend first, right? Mm-hmm. So she asked me, "How you doing?" So that's a better conversation. And then through her, I met a professor, a Palestinian Christian, who teaches I think he teaches in Jerusalem. But his family's been there for generations upon generations. So he was there. His family was there. I think he was born in 1950. So the state of Israel came into being just before he was born. But he knows all of the stories of his own family and what happened to his own family. So it was good for me to hear from his perspective and his long lineage, his long family's lineage, from the perspective of Palestinian. But it's also, to your point, a lot of what you see, it's not fruitful to engage online with a lot of folks. Sometimes I have to, because they're, early, there were the Wednesday after October 7th, there was a group of people in our hometown, Jewish people, some people who have family like us in Israel, that were getting together at City Hall to basically just mourn, to hold each other, to pray. And there were these two trucks filled with people waving the Palestinian flags, shouting from the river to the sea, and the air of violence, the threat of violence was in the air, right?
It's terrifying. It's terrifying knowing what we know. And that in a lot of instances, I mean, you hear about those kids that got locked in the library at the college while, literally pursuing, absolutely terrifying that is in modern society.
So you
can get that many people together that believe that way.
It's complete ignorance, and to talk, even my friend who was using language of colonialism and apartheid, so we were able to influence each other, and that's an instance where we were able to persuade each other, because I said, listen, here's our family story. If you knew my Uncle Sal and my Uncle Srulik, who were Zionists from when they were young men in the early 1900s, before World War I, they were already Zionists, right? Mm-hmm. Because who were we? We were peasants. We were ostracized. Jews are ostracized wherever we go, because we could always be identified as the other. We were always the other. So if you take people who didn't have any place to go, like my Baba said, they all wanted to kill the Jews, the Cossacks and the Tsars and the Tsar's army, and everybody wanted to kill. These who flee to where we can go. When my great uncles arrived in what's now Israel, what's the nation of Israel before it was even formed, and for 25 years worked towards having a safe haven in that part of the world. These are not colonizers. A dude who comes and finds his way there, mostly on foot from modern day what's now Ukraine. This does not a colonizer make, right? But I was able to. So you look at two different encounters, the kinds of crap that's being spouted online about, river to the sea, or the two truckloads of people waving the flags and the threat of violence in the air, or my conversation with my friend, who still feels very differently about a number of things than I do, but we connected, and I heard from a Palestinian professor, a Palestinian Christian professor, about his story. What did we do? We humanized each other. I think our hope is that connection. I still disagree with my friend. I still disagree with the professor on any number of things. You could write books on how many things we disagree about, but we're connected. We're humanizing each other. We see each other's humanity. You know, another funny story, and then I'll shut up. So one of my cousins is an engineer, and there was a new development being built where they grew up with Palestinian neighbors and friends and played soccer. You know, they didn't know who was who. Some's a Palestinian. This one is atheist. This one's a Muslim. This one's a Christian. But she, as an adult, she was helping to build a new community. And another engineer happened to be Palestinian. And they learned about each other's background, one Jewish, one Palestinian. And their particular job was building the sewage. And they ultimately they ultimately became friends. And they decided, you know, the way she describes it is, I think we can have peace in the Middle East because we have to figure out our crap. We have to figure out our if we can figure out our crap, we could figure out world peace. They literally had to figure out where the crap goes.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing that really does build humanity and camaraderie, is when you work together.
Yeah.
work, do actual physical work.
Got to figure out your crap.
Yeah.
Figure out your crap.
That's absolutely true.
This is
well, I kind of want to leave this on a high note.
Yeah, I like leaving it on.
You've been such a joy, and thank you so much
for
spending 2 hours with us.
Yeah, we've done a lot of interviews. This has been one of my very favorite. Corey, you
are
that's
good.
Wonderful guest.
I'd love to have you on again and again and again. And so anytime you do a new project, we will shamelessly pimp you. So you let us know if you got any books or new projects or anything coming out. We will happily plug you. That being said, if we're going to wrap up a little bit here, go ahead and tell everybody where they can find you again.
So
and all of these links, of course, will be on counterculturewise.com. So go ahead and tell everybody where they can find you.
Well, if you're looking up the Talk of Politics and Religion without killing each other on your favorite podcast app, remember just TALKIN apostrophe. If you put Talking Politics, a lot of other shows come up, but if you put in Talking without the G Politics,
like
our show with the purple
thing. Okay.
Talking. We're talking here.
I'm talking here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Talking Politics without the G. But yeah, like I said, the easiest way is politicsandreligion.us. Or you can find me at Corey S. Nathan. Corey with an E, S as in Sam, Nathan.
All right. Well, Corey, you've been a pleasure, and I would love to hear more from you. So let's don't be a stranger. Let's be friends, dude, because we got each other's deets. So
yeah,
feel free to share new things as they come, because I know you and I are, we disagree on a lot of things, but you're also very persuasive and very personable, and the world needs more.
We need more bridgers and less bombers.
Can I say just one more thing? Just as because we did cover a lot of ground where I could tell we disagree on a lot of stuff. But the idea is not for me to convince you or make 180 degrees, or I have no expectations that I'm going to convince you to vote for Biden in 2024.
No,
but I think
I tend to like my candidates to be alive. So.
Boy,
here we go. No, but I think my expectation is to persuade. If we're talking about persuasion, I'm not going to persuade by 100% or 180 degrees or whatever, but maybe 1 degree of persuasion. And it's what you said before. But the most persuasive I can be is when my disposition is such that I am allowing the possibility that I can be persuaded. So we influence each other. It's like the old story of the salt grains, the granules of salt in the shaker, and there's one young salt grain and the old salt grain. They're together, and the young one, every time it's shaken, he's like, "Oh, what's happening to our friends? We'll never see them again. They're disappearing. They're going away." And finally, the old salt granule says to the little salt granule, he says, "Yeah, they're shaken into that soup, and they're never to be seen again. But you know something? That soup will never be the same again either."
I like it.
Nice.
It.
So we're salt granules. We'll never be the same because we're affecting each other.
So is what you're saying, Corey, that I'm a salty?
No.
You need a little bit of salt. Make it. We could talk about we could talk about a little pepper. Whatever it might be. So no, that's not what I'm saying at all. I think it's just the spice of life, right?
All I can say is it's been a long time since I've had a guest come on, talk politics and religion, and still make me laugh snort. So congratulations, Corey. You're no Zionist Nazi, but you're up there in my books.
That's awesome. This has been fun. Thanks so much for including me, guys.
Thank you. Absolutely. And thanks for spending all this time with us. This is like an extra gift having you for a whole other hour and you weren't constantly looking at your watch. So you're welcome back anytime, Corey. And we will be listening to you. I actually wrote down some notes if you're wondering what I'm doing over here on other ones I need to look up and catch up with you. So
awesome. Good stuff.
All righty.
Great.
Have an amazing day and
Thanks,
have
y'all.
a great Sunday. And we'll see you again real soon on the other side. Bye.
Sounds good. Bye.